Welcome to another episode of TPM Ridge, the podcast where we bring in industry leaders in technical program management to share their insights, experiences, and the lessons they've learned on the front lines of the TPM movement. I'm your host, Doran Katz, and each week we dive in deep into the methodologies, mindsets, and tools that will empower you to drive excellence in technical program management. Whether you're new to TPM or looking to take your skills to the next level, this podcast is your go-to resource for transforming TPM principles into real-world success. Okay, welcome everyone to a new season, new episode of the TPM Ridge. I'm really excited here. We have a brand new style, brand new structure, and wanted to introduce my new panel here that we're going to be talking about a lot of TPM stuff, industry news, diving deep into a lot of the technical stuff. So I wanted to first introduce Josh Teeter, author of the Technical Program Manager's Handbook and formerly at
Hello.
Amazon.
Indeed.
Hailing from Seattle, from Washington, same as me. And we also have James Dayhoff, now with IBM, formerly with HashiCorp from the great sunny state of Texas.
Yep, that's me. Thanks.
Fantastic. And I'm excited because we went through a great first season. We did a lot of interviews. We're going to have guests on this show as well, but we wanted to have a permanent panel here that we can go through and discuss various things, and we'd love to also hear from our listeners if they have any questions as well. So we'll be putting up an email address, and you can of course reach out to us through LinkedIn, through the LinkedIn channel as well. We will dive into various topics each episode and, provide our own perspective, context, our experiences as well. So as we start the show, I'd love for you guys to get to know a bit more about us. So let's go through some of our origin stories, into how we became TPMs, why do we become TPMs and all that. So Josh, maybe you can kick things off and tell us your origin story.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh. Oh, gosh, I've been a TPM since 2010 or so, I think. I was down in the Houston area, Cypress Creek, for those who might be familiar. And I started working at Hewlett-Packard around that time. They just said I was a software engineer. Took the job, said, great, let's start coding. They said, oh, no, we pay you too much to code. You're going to help these other developers with their coding and kind of lead their project for them. So in a sense, I was a TPM before they even knew that there was a term for it. They just figured you're paying you too much to actually write code. So I dove into project planning. Swim lane diagrams was one of the first things I actually dove into to figure out the system that was in front of me. And then I kind of formalized it after that by moving over to Amazon, where they actually use the term TPM, and have grown up from there ever since. And of course, as many of you know, wrote the seminal book on TPMing called the Technical Program Manager's Handbook. It's now on the second edition, came out last year, up on the expert line at PACT. Yeah, it's a little bit about me.
It's a fantastic foundational book, for seasoned TPMs and for those who are aspiring TPMs as well. I'm sure we'll go through a lot of the content in that book throughout our season and beyond. Interesting story. I'm kind of wondering, when did Amazon first use the official TPM label, I guess? So when was it?
As far as I can tell, since the beginning. Or as I'd say since day one, but every day is day one at Amazon. Yeah. So really from the beginning, they use the term. It's one of those, and I actually touch on it a little bit in the book in the beginning. A lot of the folks in the industry attribute Amazon as the start of the TPM, but in my research, it was actually around for decades to some degree prior to that. But as the software industry started to take off during the dot-com boom, or bust really, it kind of came back into mainstream, but it had always really been there in one form or another since around the 1950s.
And so you kind of fell into it, I guess, because they didn't want you to code and spend time coding, but just sort of sheep herding the other engineers, I guess, and doing all the planning and all that, right?
Indeed, and I felt after a few years of that, I really liked the I liked that as I got more done.
Yeah.
instead of spending 8 hours writing a single function that's giving you problems or working on this one form, I'm able to help direct multiple developers and help realize a wider scope of responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Getting an entire product out the door instead of just a piece of it or a feature. Not to belittle coding, I still code. In fact, I actually just had to minimize a window because we were starting here. I still do it, I still love it, but I like the leadership that being a TPM affords you.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk more about the technical aspects and, I mean, you still coding and all that and what's important and what's not, being a TPM. But thanks for that. Let's jump over to you, James. Give us your origin story.
Yeah, sure. Josh, I think you pointed out something interesting, and this is one of the reasons I love hearing about TPM origin stories, is because most people never set out in their career to become a TPM. It's rare, right? Most people stumble into it because they are around, they have other roles that tangentially connect to it, and then they identify strongly with it and want to move into it. And so, like you mentioned, my career as a TPM did not start with the title of a TPM. I, in fact, really had no inclination growing up even to like be in the tech industry, to work with computers, nothing like that. I was interested in architecture, physical architecture and design and construction. And so
Nice.
I was able to take some of those interests and basically put it into the software and digital world. And as I was going through school, I'd never thought to myself, I'm going to be a TPM someday. I didn't know that was a role. And so really my big focus was find a skill set in college that had a sustainable way to make me marketable, right? To kind of be that launch pad. And so that was the paradigm that I went through with. And I got a bachelor's and master's degree in information systems management. So that's my background. I took a big mix of technical courses, business courses, marketing, accounting, just a bunch of stuff that helped paint the picture of how the many functional and non-functional things tie together, which, unbeknownst to me, set me up pretty well to work as a TPM later. Some of my earlier jobs were more on the technical side. I did a variety of engineering things like QA, web engineering, database engineering, analytics, and eventually my last formal engineering role was as an API engineer and leading up a team there. And in each one of those situations, my inclination and the way I always gravitated into the team was to be the one that would work with all the other stakeholders, do the communications, build out roadmaps, highlight risks, do all the TPM related things.
Right.
And so finally, I had discovered the TPM role existed. And so my first formal TPM role was at Twitter. And that was a fun time being there, working on a lot of platform and infrastructure related programs. I was there for a handful of years and then moved to HashiCorp, where I've been for a few years as a TPM as well. And now here at IBM, because the IBM just acquired HashiCorp, and so by happenstance, I am now an IBM employee working for Corp, an IBM company, and we'll see how that goes. So
the big blue,
yeah,
right?
The big blue. So that's where we've landed, and I'm still learning the ropes of what it means to be part of IBM.
Yeah,
I gotta poke for a minute. I do love that you said you moved on from Twitter. Not that Twitter was collapsed around you and you, with almost everyone, was just unceremoniously thrown out the door. But
I was lucky enough to be there during the Elon takeover and a part of the layoffs. And yeah, it was a wild ride to be a part of that and to observe kind of, there's a lot of leadership lessons that I learned in going through that experience. What happens under severe pressure to various types of people and managers and IC leaders.
I think that'll make an interesting episode for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to cover it.
We can talk about our battle scars and those different environments, right?
There we go.
So we have a few of those at Amazon too, as well.
Just a few.
Just a few, yeah. All right. PTSD aside, I'll give you a quick background on myself. Very similar, I although I kind of started in the Bay Area working at various startups, so as an engineer, but having small teams, some of the startups are about 15, 20 people, like really small, pre-funding and all that stuff. So you kind of wear multiple hats, and it's all hands on deck. So I kind of grew up with that mentality, engineering, about wanting to also be a conduit, not necessarily just be the endpoint as an engineer. And so that's what piqued my interest in different things. And so I did, aside from engineering, I did try my hand at product management, even technical writing and things like that. And, and then I kind of landed at a company called TCL down in the Bay Area. And over there, I technically I was an engineering manager, but it was a little bit more TPM. And I know, Josh, in your book, you have a interesting explanation of the difference of those two, and we'll definitely go into that in a future discussion, because it does get conflated between people, between companies, on the differences between that. And then made the schlep up to Seattle, joined Amazon, like you, Josh, formal TPM, in name as well. I really enjoyed the broad scope that I had, working with different stakeholders. Gives me sort of much higher vintage point than what I was as an engineer. So that's stuck with me for a while. And, moving over from there, I came over to Walmart. So, and continuing that TPM role in the SRE space, which is kind of different to what I'm used to. I've mostly been around product launches and stuff. So there's definitely a lot to chat about, and what an SRE TPM is, and, what is SRE, what is DevOps, and all those different sort of more contemporary terms that in the last few years that we've sort of come across. So we'll definitely give a little bit more insights into our backgrounds as we go on as well. So so let's see, where do we start? I guess for our first episode, we thought we'd talk about sort of the big elephant in the room or in the industry, which is AI and Gen AI and all that stuff. And I know it's sort of touched on different industries, different roles and professions. Definitely engineers have been immersed in using that with Copilot, with vibe coding and different things that they use that. But, as TPMs as well, we definitely, have been sort of touched by AI, and we all probably use it in different forms, directly or indirectly. So I thought we can have a panel discussion on that. Let's talk about how we use it, in our personal and professional, careers, I guess. So,
yeah, no, I think that's good. I've had a lot of conversations about AI, of course. My last little bit at Amazon, I also worked on the AGI organization, so I was in and around a lot of the AI work there. Some of my thoughts on it are maybe a little skewed towards, what I saw at Amazon for sure. I can say with a certainty that it is here to stay. It's not a fad. The same thing happened with the internet. I've seen articles from like 1994, 1995 that were talking about the internet being this fad that people were kind of jumping on, and that it's going to fade away. It was here to stay. And I think we're more quickly this time around have realized that it's not going anywhere. And so really it's a question of how do we work alongside it? How do we get the most benefit out of it? And I think that's kind of what we're poking at daily, and why this question, every time it comes up, but it's always so fascinating, because every time you ask it, it changes some. Quickly, I don't use it too much yet in a work perspective. Again, at Amazon, very strict on which tools we could use, because they didn't want our information going outside of the corporate network, and they were slow to do internal AI. On a personal side, for TPMing here, for running this nonprofit, for doing some of my own personal things, I use it a lot. I used it to develop 2 product strategies in the last few weeks. It's really good at that sort of thing, being verbose, diving into certain areas, extrapolating on ideas you have.
Yeah.
I think that's where ideation for me is kind of where it's most powerful for me. It helps get me unstuck, right? If I have this idea and I'm trying to find out how to move forward, it's almost like a hallway chat for me. I can sit there, pull up ChatGPT or Copilot, since I have a M365 subscription, right? I just use that a lot.
Yeah, similar to you, Josh. I use it very regularly in my personal life and projects that I'm doing myself. I think people are still somewhat underestimating the impact of AI. especially from a skill set perspective. If you take even one slice of the skill set, which is like prompt engineering, I think people still underestimate how valuable that will be in the coming decade, multiple decades, right? You know, I look at generations like my parents' generation and how I grew up in the age of the internet, right? And so being able to Google things, find things, you know, like just the common sense skills, common sense to me skills of being able to search things, know how the internet works and interface with it effectively set me apart from a different generation, right? And so I think that same kind of model applies with AI and in our jobs and in any job where prompt engineering is just going to be a foundational skill. It already is. Like, if you haven't been able to lean into it and leverage it, then you've already got some homework to do, right?
Yeah.
There's people that are leaps and bounds ahead, which is an intimidating thought, but I think it's just important to know like how fast a market can shift and how fast we need to be able to adapt. And so, you know, I in my personal life, I use it for a lot of things, from, you know, pull me up a good recipe for this or that, and it drafts it up and I say, these are my ingredients. What can I work with, right? To creating entertaining stories for my kids of characters they know, and then them able to go in and modify these stories all they want. It's pretty cool from that angle. And then from a work perspective, using it for just very straightforward things like I need a Google Sheets formula to do this and this. Help me produce.
Oh, nice.
It's a simple thing, right? But it's a quick productivity hack that I probably would have spent 3-4x times longer trying to figure out, researching forums on Stack Overflow or whatever other areas.
Scrolling through awful websites that have a pixel of content surrounded by a million ads, hoping that scrolling a million times, is this going to give me what I'm looking for? Nope.
Exactly. So writing up the pseudocode and the explanation of like what I'm trying to get for either Google Sheets, JQL, and any of those basic filtering things that don't have proprietary information required. They're fantastic use cases. And like you said, Josh, that that sounding board of AI is incredible. I think the most recent superpower that I discovered was the ability to create scenarios, right? I was looking at health insurance plans as I'm moving companies, right? I have to pick a new health insurance plan. And I gave it some parameters and I said, okay, based on this information, help me run some scenarios of which one would be a good idea, which one would be a bad idea based on these scenarios. And it just helped me analyze it from a more in-depth perspective than I could have gotten on my own, and probably a lot more effective than like calling up the health insurance hotline and talking to somebody about it. And so yeah, it's a superpower that's going to become just a normal everyday tool. It's going to become a hammer that everybody is accustomed to.
It's really interesting. And the way I kind of think of as TPMs, the way I kind of think of AI is, we as TPMs, our soft skills of working with engineers and sort of communicating them what we need and things like that. I kind of see a similar role that we play with the, at least for now, non-sentient sort of being the AI, and sort of, and that's where prompt engineering comes in, right? You can say something in a very simplistic, non-contextual way, and it may or may not get it right. But, as you kind of hone in your skills and, you kind of look, I was looking at some of the different techniques, such as what is it, the COT. There's an interview method, and there's also a what the C stand for, but basically it's a tree method where you can actually do decisions. You can actually provide a tree sort of scenario, and that's when you mentioned about the health insurance and stuff like that. That's one of the techniques. But the interview technique is basically where you say, you are an interviewer, and then you can ask me all the questions. So it actually asks me clarifying questions, like a good engineer might, hopefully, instead of just assuming everything and just going straight to coding something that nobody wants at the end. So I think that skill set, that soft skill set that you have with
chain of thought,
and chain of tree.
Yeah. And on that note, a while back, I used it as a mock interviewer for TPM interviews. And it was really, really great. I would say, here's the job description. I pasted it in. I said, here's my resume. Now interview me for this role. And then afterwards, give me feedback on things that maybe I should have pulled in from my resume And so it'll go through, and especially if you have one of the tools that has a voice enabled companion like ChatGPT, I think right now is my top preference for voice capability. And if you do that dialogue of an interview with ChatGPT and you specifically tell it, don't just agree with me, like, try to really test me on some of these things, it does a pretty good job, and it gets you into that mode of being able to vocalize your experience. And it's a fantastic tool that you can use in that way too.
Can I ask you to play devil's advocate maybe if you're going to have a meeting with a stakeholder, and you can ask to kind of be your counterpart, I guess.
That's a good one.
That's a good idea. I didn't think of it that way, but it's fantastic. So definitely, we're all here in consensus that, it's a critical skill. How deep or how technical should a TPM get with this? We're talking about here just prompt engineering. We're talking about, building, learning how to build an agent, understanding the different concepts of how a tokenizer works. I mean, at what level should we be familiar with Gen AI, for example?
I think, I hate to say it depends, but it really does. I think there's two different schools of thought. It depends on, or maybe there's multiple schools of thought, but at least two. I'm going to use an analogy, and James is kind of getting on this of, we're the internet age, but we're also, at least I'm old enough, sitting at 41, almost 42. I'm also early mainstream computers. So I got my first computer in 1993. It was a 3.11 for workgroups, right? Was my first computer, which meant that it broke a lot, and I had to literally open it up and see what it was doing, physically move things around, switch COM ports, understand interrupt requests, all these sort of things, just to get new devices to work. So I had this, or still have this, kind of fundamental basic understanding of what a computer is and how it behaves. So with that knowledge, when I'm faced with solving a problem, I maybe have a kind of an edge up because I understand what I'm interfacing with a bit more. I understand that if I ask a computer to do X, that I'd really expect to see Y. And if I'm not seeing that, I have a better idea of maybe where to look because I have this foundational understanding. So if I'm bring that forward, I don't think you necessarily need to know how an AI system breaks tokens down, for example. But depending on the scenario or how you're utilizing AI, that could be helpful. For instance, I think this is all fixed now, but a few months ago, you could ask any AI other than, I think Perplexity was the only one that got it right, but all the other ones you'd say, how many R's are in strawberry? And they all would get it wrong by one. They would miss one of them. Claude would gaslight you and tell you you're wrong and why you're wrong. and you have to go back and force it to go step by step before it would realize it's a mistake. But it would sit there and gaslight you. The other ones are just be like, oh, wow, you're right. There is more than one. You're so smart. So, and that comes down to the tokens. So if you understand that going in, like when I asked that, I said, oh, they're having a problem with their tokenization. And I can move on and I can realize that what their answer back to me is wrong. And here's likely where it's wrong. Not so much so that I can, analyze or to go fix it for them, but to give me better understanding as to their output. Which side, how truthful might this be? So the more you understand the AI, the more understanding you'll have of what it spits back out at you and how to maybe nudge it to push the conversation in the right way. Just like with Google, if I'm asking a question, it's down to what are the right keywords. So that level, I think, is important.
Yeah, I like the theme of what I'm hearing you say is like trust but validate, right? Or maybe the opposite of validate and then trust, right? Like, but as a TPM, you need to know some of the reasons of what you need to validate and why. Like, why is it something I shouldn't trust all the way? Like, why does it behave the way it does? Even if you don't know down to the bits and bytes of, the reasoning, but understanding there's a tokenization process that happens, and I roughly know how it breaks apart words, right? And therefore, there's going to be issues with other things I may ask it. So in your own use, like, you're asking how much should we know? What should we know about AI? How deep? And I think it depends on the lens that you're looking at it through. One lens is using it as a TPM in your own job to maybe summarize documents, maybe, make some queries, do some more kind of very Gen AI related use cases. What are the limitations of it? Be cautious about that. The other part that I think is going to become more prevalent is knowing the limitations from a software engineering perspective so that you can build that into a risk log of some type, right? If you know if your program has teams that are heavily relying on AI for coding support, either using Cursor or Copilot, like be familiar with what the limitations are there and what the gotchas are, and make sure in the code pipeline that there's checks for some of these things before they really cause challenges and problems. So helping engineering teams understand those limitations if they aren't there themselves, I think is an area that TPMs need to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you say, I think that the term going around now is vibe coding,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
right? Where you're having the AI do the majority of the coding, and that can be fine if you have, again, if you have a foundational knowledge. I can write C# no problem. So to ask an AI to write something in C#, I can then scrutinize what it returns back, right? But if I'm new to the development world, maybe I don't know Python, but that's what my team is using. So I'm relying heavily on AI to help me with Python. I may not be able to scrutinize what it's returning as well. And if it works, if it runs, you go, cool, yeah, look, it runs. But maybe it's, doing some really wacky, inefficient things in order to make it run, right? So yeah, you've got to be, I think, both for your own and also for your team, like you said, help the team understand the gotchas, maybe make your tooling, like you said, have checks in the pipeline to understand some of those.
Yeah. And, like being familiar with the code-based language that your engineers are using, because one fact that TPM should understand is that coding supplemented by AI is not equal across languages. It has proficiency most. I think one of the latest points of research said Python is like the most proficient and accurate results that it can generate. I think C or C++ was one of the least proficient ones where it most consistently.
Because it's highly strict.
What was
it's
that?
highly, right? So C is a very strictly typed language, right? You put one thing, you're a character off in the way you type it. The whole thing falls apart.
Care about pointers, care about everything.
Python doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a lot more forgiving over spaces and whether you use var to declare something or
you could have an array of like every single type in or a list or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
right?
so it's both good and bad there. But yeah, that's a very good point, and I think even that's going to change over time.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder though if in the future there will be languages that companies start strategically choosing because of their AI friendliness. If that'll become a factor for CTOs to look at, okay, what are we going to build this tech stack with?
Yeah.
Well, this is an AI friendly language and it'll accelerate productivity. So we're not going to choose this other one because we favor productivity and speed right now. I don't know. That could be a decision point we see later.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably naturally happening from both ends there, right? It's more popular with AI. One, because the language is less strict, sure, so it's more forgiving. But two, prior to AI, universities switched to Python. They switched from Java to Python for their classes because, again, it's a little more forgiving, a little more abstract. It allows the teachers to worry less about you mangled those brackets and more about the actual concepts. So you have this new generation who knows Python. They get into the workforce and they say, sorry, I only know Python. Well, do you take the time and force them to learn this other language? Or, well, the server can run Python, so just let them do it. It's fine. So it's happening from both ends there, kind of organically, and until something comes along and supplants Python for whatever reason from either end of that spectrum, I think that's kind of where we're headed. And then it's a reinforcing cycle. So then you have all these developers who are writing in Python. They submit their repos to GitHub. GitHub gobbles that up, hands it to the LLM. The LLM is now more proficient in Python, right? So the more you use it because AI understands it, the more AI is going to understand it, the more people are going to use it.
Yeah.
Right. Josh, the analogy you gave before about the strawberry with the R's and all that and gaslighting actually got me thinking about it. As a TPM, I'm sure you've been gaslit before by engineers. So it's kind of a similar thing, right? you have to have that intuition, so you at least know when you're being gaslit or not. If an engineer is talking about a problem, oh, we have to solve it this way or that way. The same thing with Gen AI. You need to have that intuition to know, okay, that's probably not right, even though it's saying that. So you may not know Java and you come from a Python background and it tries to code in Java for you. You have that somewhat of an engineering background. You at least know some of the systems design aspects, so you can kind of, see if it passes the sniff test or whatever. So I think that's probably, an important thing. So I guess closing the loop on this for our listeners, you have to have Gen AI in your skill set. Definitely before even going through any of the other coding proficiency classes you'll take, or any of those Coursera things, get familiar enough with Gen AI, take a couple of classes, be able to demonstrate that you can do prompt engineering, and it's going to stick with us for the foreseeable future. So it's only going to be more proficient. There's going to be a lot more investment from companies. So the expectation is you got to be up there and adapt with the environment, especially in this volatile world, with work and all that, to make yourself different, to make yourself stand out, that's one of the skill sets, right, that you're going to have to be able to demonstrate. Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, this. We'll have no doubt a lot more episodes. We'll go into a lot more things. I can talk about some of the stuff that I did or are doing in Walmart with Gen AI, because we're definitely very much, knee deep in it, and very liberal with all the different types of large language models that we're using. And that's a subject for a future debate. And we're closing it in a time now. Great, interesting start to the season for us. And so, yeah, we're going to be hopefully doing this once a month, brand new episode, post out the email address, but it is, what is it? Is it podcast@tpmevents.org, right? Yeah.
Yep.
That's the new email address that we have. So podcast@tpmevents.org, and we'll post that in the show notes as well. So as we close off, let's do a few plugins here. So Josh, your book, where can the audience find it? Where can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, you can get the copy on Amazon, of course. That's actually the preferred distribution, though you can go to Pact directly, both in PDF form, like ebook, physical copy, of course. It does work on Kindle if you go in that direction. I don't think this version, the second edition, has an audio yet. I suspect that will come soon. Yeah.
Oh, otherwise you can record your own book, I guess. I don't know how that works, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how one describes figures and tables in text.
Yeah.
That sounds like it'd be boring to listen to. Table 1, column 2.
I've heard those in audiobooks. I do have a few technical books, and even I think I might even have a programming book in a Kindle audiobook. So it's how it is. Well, we can figure it out. James, we know you have a great, amazing newsletter. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I have been running a newsletter called the TPM Craft for, I think I'm in my 3rd year now with that newsletter, and it is all about becoming a high-impact technical program manager. Whether you're new to the craft or you're aspiring to get better in the craft, I write on many domains that are relevant to being a good technical program manager. So things like technical program management, program management, system design, product management, leadership, general engineering principles. So there's a wide swath of things that I talk about on there. I only publish once a month. I used to publish a lot more frequently, but these days it's once a month. And you can find it by Googling the TPM Craft. And I just did a quick test, and it does show up as on the first page there. So we got some SEO working in my favor. Alternatively, if you can't find it there, you look for me on LinkedIn, James Dayhuff, and it's linked in my profile. There are 2 James Dayhuffs on LinkedIn. I am not the business analyst, James Dayhuff. I am the technical program manager, James Dayhuff. So look for me there and connect with me. Even if you don't want the newsletter, I'm always happy to connect with more people.
I just think we gave that other person a lot of traffic now. Hopefully it doesn't get a lot of random requests. You can also find, on our show notes, you'll also be able to find a link to your newsletter, and I don't know, maybe even Perplexity or ChatGPT if you type it in. I don't know. I haven't tested it out. Have you tried?
I haven't, but that'll be what I do once we end this podcast episode.
Yeah. Okay. And a little plug in for myself, TPM University. So just go to tpmuniversity.com, and there you'll find some newsletters, you'll find an article or two every week. We sort of dive into some of the various topics a little bit deeper, and there's some videos as well, and some PDF infographics and booklets as well. So look out for the information on that on the show notes as well. And yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been an excellent first episode. Really exciting. Hopefully, you guys like this format. We'll be very, informative in different areas, and hopefully, you guys learn something new.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Happy TPMing, everybody.
Happy TPMing.
I think we've got the new sign out thing. Happy TPMing. Bye, everyone.